All right, everyone, we're here. Welcome to Craft Talk and Conversations. And today I have the lovely Ronit Plank with me. And I'm really excited to talk to you today, Ronit, about your podcast, Let's Talk Memoir, which is just a fabulous resource for memoir writers. Um, you've got one season, you just told me it was going to be a limited podcast series, but now you've decided to keep going with it. So
hmm
do you want to talk about why you started? Oh, whoops, my battery. Why you started it and what's just the
Yeah.
enthusiasm of memoir writing.
Yes. First of all, thank you for having me. Really happy to be here and so happy to be part of your community today, this morning. Um, so I'm a memoir writer, but we met at Pacific University, Pacific MFA
Yes,
program, where I was in the program for fiction and you were there for fiction. And
that's
we,
right.
we just crossed because you left right around the time I started. And so that's another really lovely part about this connection because we both went to the same place to study and we've kind of like reunited, which is great. I was fiction. I started writing short stories. That's how I began writing and publishing
Hmm.
about 12 years ago. But then I realized that I was telling all these stories that had to do with my life and my mom leaving for a guru, and blah, blah, blah. And so I switched over to memoir. To the nonfiction course and started studying with Deborah Gwartney for memoir. And I had these ideas about memoir that I now think are funny. Like, for example, I thought, who would want to hear my story? My story doesn't matter. There are too many memoirs. Why are people whining? I also didn't think my story was that special. I didn't think it was that unique or difficult. That I had much to say about it. There was a lot I didn't understand about
So,
memoir.
so there's that, like that you are not alone, I think,
hmm
in that way of thinking. I hear all the time from writers that think, why, my story doesn't matter.
hmm
Why would anybody want to read this, etc. So, what was your journey from that kind of
hmm
thinking into recognizing that this story was important for you to tell? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that Deborah Gwartney, who was teaching at Pacific, was instrumental because I started off by writing essays. I was like, I'm going to write an essay for my entire, semester with her. I'm just going to write essays because I don't want to do memoir. And I've told this story many times, probably at your writing conference as well. But she sent me back notes on my 20-page essay and said, why don't you just write the memoir already? This is like this chronological thing about your whole life that takes 20 pages. Why don't you just write the memoir? And I was like, okay. And she told me, if you don't write your story, somebody else is going to write it for you. And that
Hmm.
struck a chord with me. And in fact, Deborah Gwartney ended up being the very first guest on my podcast, Let's Talk Memoir. So, and it was really full circle for me because I studied with her. That's where my memoir manuscript for When She Comes Back was born. It took a couple of years after graduating to get it, in shape and get a publisher. And it came out last May. So I'm heading into, I can't believe it, a year since that memoir came out.
I know. I
time
know.
time has gone by fast. But so in my year or so of having the book out and in my years leading up to having it out and reading so many memoirs and studying them and talking to memoirists, what grew for me was an incredible appreciation for the genre. And I'm
Hmm.
now completely a memoir lover instead of a self-hating memoirist. I was like a self-hating memoirist. I was like, it's a memoir. In fact, I remember my husband saying to me years ago, he's like, please don't tell me you're going to write a memoir.
Oh no. Oh
Because I
no.
think I think there's this idea that there's too many, right? But
Mm.
I asked one of my guests on episode, I can't remember what episode 3, I think Meg Weber, or episode 4, are there too many memoirs? Can there be too many memoirs? And she said, no, unabashedly no, because the idea of the memoir, and this is getting into your earlier question, is that we all have our own experience.
Hmm.
You and your sibling, for example, can remember the same event in your family differently, and the same event in your family, and this is just an example to help people understand better.
Yeah.
The same event means something different to you. How you remember it is different, and the effect that big event had on you and your sibling are totally different from each other, similar and different. And so, yes, there are other people whose moms left them for a guru who maybe they don't talk to their mom like I talk to mine now. Maybe there are people who did things like join a cult themselves who should write their story. I
Hmm.
was left by someone who joined a cult, but I was still living in this container of my life and grew up a certain way and had losses because of what I experienced and made my way back to knowing how to be a mom and a partner in relationships and have a relationship with my parents in a way that somebody else wouldn't. So the memoir is not just about, what happened to you. And I'm not
Yeah.
the only one who said this. It's what you think and what you make of what happened to you. And my understanding is different from somebody else's, which is why all the stories are good. All the stories are useful.
Yes, I wanted to comment on two things. One is that, nobody ever says, are there too many novels?
Yeah,
Just to
that's true.
that memoir is a genre, and that, it has its own place, and
Mm-hmm.
in the
Mm-hmm.
library and on bookshelves. And so it isn't like, oh, there's just too many and you're going to tip the scales somehow or
Yeah, and
something like that.
there's so many different kinds of memoir too. I mean, I I
Yes.
I love lots of different memoir. I'm a big fan, especially of the coming of age and the insecure childhood memoir because that's pretty
Hmm.
much mine. I love a story about a child, a memoirist looking back on the child them trying to figure out how to survive. That's my special sweet spot. But I love all memoirs and I read them voraciously.
Hmm.
And in my memoir, yeah, go ahead.
I just went on a memoir bender. I read like I had this like stack of memoirs that I've really just devoured, and am maybe embarking on my own. I started
Mm.
writing. I'm like, oh my goodness.
What's
Um,
happening,
yeah,
Tracy?
I know. And I thought that I was done with this particular subject, but apparently I'm not. So one of the things that, well, first of all, I want to just acknowledge Deborah Gortney as your first guest, and really encourage everyone to listen to at least that episode, because Deborah Gortney is one of those people that is, I think, under recognized as a writer and as a teacher. I always learned something so deep from her
Absolutely.
craft talks, and just really really admire her as both a writer, like her what is the first memoir she wrote? uh
Live through
oh,
this.
it's
And
so good.
it is so good. And then her second one is I Am a Stranger Here Myself.
Hmm.
And I think that she is just every time she speaks, I'm not obviously because of my background, I'm not going to be someone who like follows a guru or anything. But people, when they were following her at the people would listen to her lectures, and people would just always have a little trail after her. I said to her, I like imprinted on her. She was like a mother goose or something for me because I was just
Totally.
like Deborah. But so yeah, Deborah is and also I should, in the background I have the picture of my memoir, but I have to get one of these for this is the Let's Talk memoir, graphic. So you can get that on Spotify and on Apple. And so a little bit about it. The first episode is with Deborah Gortney, and that is it's called Who Am I? Character versus Narrator, which is a really big issue that comes up in writing memoir. It's something that I'm looking closer at because I'm going to be crafting sort of a class on that to help
Mhm.
people try to capture that voice, because sometimes the narrator in the memoir is really confounding and it comes up again and again. How do you
Absolutely.
talk about the past with the current knowledge that you have and leave the younger you, even if that was just 5 years ago, alone, but also inform the younger you with what you know now? That's a big one. And then who was my second one? Oh, the second podcast episode was with Janine Ouellette, whose beautiful memoir, The Part That Burns, is about
Hmm.
trauma she experienced as a child with sexual abuse. And that's a great look at how to write traumatic events, which so many of us have experienced, and also how to write a memoir that's not linear, because linear is not for everyone. And
Yes.
there's also this idea of how do you find the thread. And Ellen Blum-Barish is in one of my episodes. I can't remember the order. I have 7 episodes out now, and it's going to go till about 12 or 13 for this season. And then I'm going to take a little break as I find, content for the next season. But I
Hmm.
also am happy to announce I have Jane Friedman, the writing and publishing expert. She's coming on next week. I just had my interview with her, and that was really illuminating in terms of memoir, the landscape for publishing, what happens, on her side of things, what she sees a lot in memoir manuscripts.
Yes, I think just it sounds like such a rich season and so many nuggets for writers who are embarking on or have been writing their memoir for years, some people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the well, there's so many things. I would like
Yeah,
pack
and I
we
want to
pack it
just
on.
tag on to that. Like I wanted the podcast to be somewhat timeless. It is
Hmm.
evergreen, and I want it to be able to be sort of that little shot in the arm, little infusion, or like, that little vitamin shot that you need. Sorry to keep using these like vitamin metaphors, but just that little rejuvenation you could have when you're writing and feeling a little alone in the
Hmm.
process. And there are a lot of writing podcasts that are great. I wanted this one to focus on memoir because I'm such a fan of it.
I love the metaphor for the inoculation, vitamin inoculation, because I do think about nourishment in
Hmm.
terms of the writing process, and it's one of the
Hmm.
things that I talk about too. And I think that we can get a little dry and dehydrated and,
And
you
also
know,
you're in the echo chamber of your mind. And sometimes
mm,
when you get to that point in your writing, I don't know if this happens for you as a fiction writer, but where you just feel like, please, I mean, I remember feeling this way about my memoir, like, please take this and tell me what to do with it. I've got this
mm,
creature, this like thing I'm building, and it's so vulnerable, and it's got so many good things in
mm,
it, but I don't know what to do with it. It's almost like a little injury or wound when you're at that, not the story, but this process in your writing where you're like, how do I finish this? How do I make this better? What is the answer? And you can feel really vulnerable and sad, especially when other writers, are posting about their good news or their books are out, and you just feel so much like you're in waiting, right? So some
yeah.
words of wisdom can help.
That vulnerability, which is so key to actually writing anything, I think, but so difficult to hold space for and sometimes be in. And particularly, I find when I am writing truths, when I am writing, events that happen, I just sometimes like get overwhelmed by the experience, or, not re-traumatized necessarily, but it definitely brings up stuff. And
Yeah.
I wonder about your process writing your beautiful book when she comes back and entering those emotional fields that, left you feeling perhaps a little raw, or yeah, how you handled that. And if you
Hmm.
talk about that at all in the season,
We
in
do
any of
talk
this,
about
yeah.
that. Yes. In fact, I would say that Meg Weber's episode, which her episode is titled Not Too Soon, Not Too Much. And all these, if you just look, you'll see the listing with the numbers. And also, like I said, Janine Ouellette's, which is episode 2, because there are ways to handle writing trauma. And Laura Davis is coming up soon. And she also really talks about that because she's a coach as well. And I
Hmm.
think there are some ideas you can use that they offer. And one of the more simple ones is you could, for example, light a candle and say, I'm only going to write for 20 minutes right now. This is my candle. This is my safe space. And I'm going to write for 20 minutes into this scene or into this difficult memory. Then I'm going to blow out the candle and I'm going to sit and I'm going to walk away. I'm just going to give it a break. I'm only doing this. It's bite sized. The other thing that people can do is have sort of a simultaneous process of being in therapy while they're working on something that's difficult and painful. And for me, and there's lots of different tools that people use. The other thing that Janine Olette recommended was sometimes it's more about the how than the what. And so, for example, the structure and the vehicle with which you approach your work can help you. For example, let's say you have a really difficult memory. You can approach it in poetry. You can approach it in word association. You can talk about an object in the room or in the space where this happened by way of getting into the memory so that you're not right on the nose having to put dialogue in people's mouths in your book, in the characters, where
Hmm.
you don't have to go step by step into the abuse or the trauma. And Janina Let, she handles child sexual abuse without ever getting into specific details that are graphic or disturbing, but you know what's happened and you feel her pain.
Yes.
I hope
I
that's
think,
helpful.
yeah, absolutely. And when I've talked to Nicole Bright too, she talks about alternative forms playing with structure. So, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about memoir. It's about the beautiful thing about writing, I think, is that we don't have to approach the story in a kind of linear way. And you mentioned that. But I think that oftentimes, and especially when you're beginning, you think that the story goes, this happened, and then this happened, and then this
Yes.
happened, which is not always the way that the story wants to be told.
Yes, that's true. And I'm a very, in some ways, I'm very organized and I can run into rigidity with myself.
Are
In
you a
other,
Virgo?
I am. I was going to say that, but I didn't want to be
I'm a
dopey.
Virgo too.
Yay! I didn't want to be like, I'm a Virgo, but I'm a Virgo and I'm type A. And though my desk is messy many times, I like to post messy desk photos sometimes because it's the truth. But in other respects, I'm extremely organized, and it's hard for me sometimes to write and feel free to write until I have my structure. But dear writers, sometimes we cannot find the structure until we have the content. Sometimes we don't know what it needs to look like. So you have to kind of trust the process and, understand that everything you write, nothing is wasted. So even if you
Mhm.
don't end up using it later, even if it never sees the light of day, it helped you to get to this next stage of your writing. So don't, like, for me, sometimes I feel like I want to be efficient and I'm like, well, I'm not going to spend time on something that I'm not going to use, but you have to, like, you have to
Yeah.
sometimes. And there's only been a couple of pieces I've ever written that kind of were hatched the way that they came out and stayed that way. I
Yeah.
have had one or two pieces where they just like came out of me, short essays, and boom, they found a home and they were like ready to go. The rest, you
I
have to.
know that's sort of like the myth. I remember like one of my first stories I ever wrote, it was like it came out and I'm like, oh, that's easy. Just like the biggest
You're like, oh,
tease ever.
this writing thing is
Whoops.
not hard at all.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I think that that's so my internet is saying it's unstable, so hopefully
Okay.
it
I
will
still see you.
stabilize.
Hopefully it's okay.
Yeah. What was I going to say about that?
About the structure and the
The
linear.
structure. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, the no the myth of efficiency and in writing, like
Mm-hmm.
that process is messy. That sure we can find ways to make things happen faster, but there's still this kind of swirly process to get us
There really
there.
is. And I think one of my goals in the next piece I write,
Whoops.
well, oh, did you lose me? Oh
Are you
no.
there, Ronit?
I definitely can hear you. You have frozen, but I can hear you. So maybe should I continue talking? Yep, there you are.
Yeah, yep,
I
keep
see you.
going.
I see you. Um, I have been doing some more creative nonfiction writing lately, just like a little bit of poetry. It's sort of like a palate cleanser. And I'm not saying that poetry is a palate cleanser. I'm saying that my poetry is a palate cleanser because I'm a new tiny little baby trying to be a poet. And I've got a couple of pieces coming out that are like little more lyrical essays that started as a poem. And for me, that was really refreshing to just lean into sort of a hermit crab form or just something different that didn't ask to be A to B. It was fun for me to just get the impact of the feeling and what I'm trying to say without structuring it. But the next project I work on, I'm going to try to remain loose and try to do some exercises along the way so I don't feel locked in to this sort of like I'm at a desk and I have to write from A to B. And I would just, do what works for you. Anyone who tells
Absolutely.
you, everything is to be taken as you need it and throw away what you don't need. Some of what we're talking about resonates, I'm sure, and some of it isn't really hitting. And that's okay. That's who you are as a writer.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important and something for sure that I emphasize is to try things and then let them go if they don't work because there isn't one way to do this writing thing.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
So we're kind of nearing the end of our time here together, Ronit, and
Say it isn't so.
I know, stay on after, but I want people to be able to find your podcast because
Yeah.
I think even if you're a fiction writer, you will get something out of Ronit's podcast. It's just fabulous. And
Oh, thank
if
you.
nothing else, listen to Deborah Courtney because she's so
Yes.
smart. I'm sure
Yes, yes.
all the yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sure
that
all the
was
guests
like
are.
people just love that. But I also encourage you, just like with your writing, bounce around, listen to the episodes in any podcast that appeal to you. You don't have to listen in order. That's a good way to break the Virgo ice. Don't
Yeah.
listen to my podcast in order. So at the risk of being too at the risk of being too promotiony, this is the podcast again. Let's talk memoir, and it's on Apple and Spotify, and you can find it there as well. You can go to my website, which is ronitplank.com, and there are all of my podcasts because I have three, plus appearances that I've done and writing and all that. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, dare I say TikTok, all under Ronit Plank. I'm very, very communicative. I love to connect a lot. And so you can find me, you can ask me questions, you can suggest ideas. In fact, someone messaged me on Twitter who we are connected and asked me if I could please cover some things on my episode. And in fact, I asked Jane Friedman some of her questions yesterday. So absolutely
Nice.
send me suggestions, ideas, anything.
So, and Ronit is part of this Facebook group,
Yes.
so you can connect with her through here. And Ronit, would you be willing to put your podcast link into the comments below this conversation? You don't,
Yes.
you could do it after we're done.
Okay. I was like,
Yeah,
ah.
that would be great because then people can have a direct link and find you without a
Did you
problem.
see? Did you see? I thought you meant right now, and I went like this. Yes, I'll figure
I
that
know,
out.
deer in headlights. No, 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 when we're done, because we're on yeah. So thank you so much, Ronit, for being here with us today. And I am so looking forward to listening to the rest of this season of Talk
Oh,
Memoir.
thank you. I love being your guest, and I love talking with you.
Me too. Okay, take care and bye, everyone.
Bye.